be demonstrating focus dry brushing, as demonstrated here with the smooth gradients and stuff, and also on the white right here. So the focus dry brushing is most successful on big open panels, especially on Eldar type stuff, Eldar flyers. You can do it on a lot of War Machine type stuff, the Warjacks, things like that with their big panels of armor. So to begin with, I am going to start out with primed black model and work my way up. Here's my gradient of colors. The main color I'm going for is a real turquoisey color. So I start building my way up, starting with the darkest blue, and then those I save for later. But that's pretty much the level of gradient. And then when beginning your focus dry brush, you want to pay close attention to the size of your dry brush. If you use something super big, it starts making stuff really streaky, and you can't quite get the cool shading effect like what kind of hangs out around here or in here. It just kind of hits over everything. If you use it way too small, it starts getting streaky and kind of lost, and the colors don't round out as easily. So make sure you're comfortable with the size. It gets the effect that you're looking for. But to start off, I'll start off with my darkest color, dark Prussian blue. And dry brushing, you load your brush up, and then get most of the pigment off. And you can kind of tell if you have enough paint or not. You can test it on your hand, kind of feel how much is on there. You can start off by putting it on the model in an area where you know a lot of color is going to go on. Like I wouldn't start off down here because I want a lot of shadow down here. So just kind of block it on, you know, I don't quite have enough, put a little bit more on. You really got to feel it out. And with focus dry brushing, it's a little different than just straight dry brushing where you mimic the light hitting the model, where you stroke down and the pigment kind of catches on all the raised edges. Focus dry brushing, you kind of smear it more into the model, not relying as much on the model to pick out the details for you because there aren't a lot of raised edges on the big smooth areas. So you're paying attention to a lot of it yourself. Kind of steering away from the areas that you know a lot more shadow is going to hit, you know, the light's coming down, say it's the sun or whatever. So a lot of your color is going to be right in here, not so much on the edges or in these groups right here. So it's probably the longest part of the process right here. Putting down the first layer because you're going to want the most color. The difference between working on a panel back here versus this big open area is you really want to steer clear of putting too much paint right in those grooves right there where you know there's going to be a lot of shadow. Light's going to be hitting it mostly on the parts that are hanging out. Not worrying too much about getting like deep in the grooves back here, but really paying attention to what's out here. Cool, so that's gonna be our first layer. It's pretty subtle, it's not a huge difference from, you know, just a straight primed black, but you can tell it's starting to get blue. Wash off what I've got going on. I'm gonna stick with the size brush that I have now. Later I'm gonna move on to a smaller brush because I'm gonna want more focused areas of color to go on. So then I move up to heavy blue, or it's pretty much the same shade as just straight Prussian blue. This is dark Prussian blue, and there's also Prussian blue or heavy blue, depending on the brand that you want. And make sure your dry brush is entirely dry. It might be useful just to get an entirely different brush that's the same size. I've been doing this a long time, so I know when it's good and dry enough, but if there's any water on it, it makes it streaky, and it is not a smooth process. But here we go again. Same thing, just less pigment. You can see I had a bit too much paint on the brush going on. It's okay because I know I'm going to have a lot of blue going on right here, but once I start working it out to the edges, I want to make sure it's just the right amount of paint going down. But kind of work it, smooth it out, smear it on. It's kind of like coloring with colored pencils or crayons or something. You just scribble it on. keeping in mind that you're working with a 3D object and paying real close attention to where that light is going to hit. Again, noticing that I'm not going all the way to the edges. I'm still leaving those dark parts right in here. Because if you just dry brush the whole thing, smear on paint everywhere, it's just going to look like a lot of layers caked up on each other, and the effect is really going to be lost. So pay attention to what layers you have put down and be very strategic in what you are putting down currently. One thing to watch out for is if you're smearing on a layer and it starts flaking off a bit, it could be that the layer that you put down previously isn't quite dry all the way. So it works just to set the model down, leave it for a little bit, and come back, or work on a different area, whatever works for you. Something to pay attention to when you're working with this technique is that it's pretty messy. It starts getting up, it's starting to creep up on this guy's leg, and so you want to pay attention to the order of things that you would want to work on the biggest parts first, and then go in and spend more time cleaning up the later details, if that makes sense. Yeah, just know what you're going to be dry brushing is going to get on most of the model. You can be strategic with it by using a smaller dry brush, but just be careful. Don't spend a ton of time working on the seat of his bike and then go in dry brush, because it's quite likely you're going to get some color that's on the panels of the bike onto the seat. And the smaller brush you go, the less likely that is to happen. But it's good to keep in mind that you want to match the size of your brush to what you're working on. Because if you start using smaller brushes, it's going to take forever to smear it all in there, and it's not going to go on as smooth because it's not the right size. It's too small, and you can't get large swaths of areas. So that's the second layer. Still not as bright as the original, as the finished project is going to look, but you can see the layers are starting to work with each other and build it up. Alright, here we go with our third layer, and it's good to note that the color that I'm really going for is turquoise. There's a lot of turquoise going on. The colors I have right here really complement that turquoise. These brighten it, those add the shadows. So this is probably going to be the last color that I'm going to use this bigger dry brush, and then once I start getting to the highlight colors, I'm going to start using a smaller dry brush. So that in mind, this is going to be a main color. You're not going to want to be, you're not going to want to skimp with it. Be generous with it. Something to note when you're dry brushing, if you're not necessarily going to use blue colors like I'm using right here, be careful with the brush that you've got going on. Turquoise is a very saturated color, so it will tint your brush. If I go ahead and use the color yellow right afterwards, it's gonna start smearing into there. So make sure you clean off your brush real good. I'm okay with it right now because I'm working just with blue colors, so it's not gonna matter if my turquoise is tinted blue from the previous color, because it's all blue. But pay attention to that. That's probably the starkest layer. You can really see it going on. Most of the layers are pretty subtle, but the turquoise, we want it to be stark because we want the model to look turquoise when we're done. Yeah, again, it's not your typical dry brush where you're brushing it down and trying to catch all the edges of stuff. You're smearing it on, you're working it on. The more you smear it on, the smoother it goes. So keep working it. It's not like watercolors where if you do too much, it looks streaky and weird. This is acrylic painting. You really wanna put as much time and love and process into it as you can. The more you use, the smoother it looks. You can even add more colors, more shades of blue if you've got them. So, but this is sufficient for our needs right now. And you can really see that shadow starting to pop right in there. You want to keep it nice and stark, and the edges that are going along here. You really like that. You want that to happen, and it's a really easy effect to get with dry brushing. Something to note with dry brushing as well is that when you dry brush a color on versus getting your brush wet and actually painting it on there, it's going to go on a lot lighter than if you just painted it straight on. So you can dry brush on your turquoise, be finished, be okay with the smoothness, and you can even go back in and do a completely other layer of turquoise, and it'll just enhance it, make it brighter. So pay attention to that, the layers that you put on. The more you put it on, the brighter it's going to be. But if you put on just one layer, it may be okay for what you're looking for, but it's going to go on darker than if you just painted it straight on. It's often going to be tinted a little bit the color of what you had down, which is why we started working with such dark colors to begin with. Alright, and that's that for this size brush. I'm gonna start working with more highlights now. It's because, like I said before, I really want the model to look turquoise. So now I'm gonna work on highlighting that turquoise with these colors, so I'm not gonna use as much. But here you go with electric blue. Much of the same process. If you're ever unsure of where exactly your highlights are gonna hit, a really good technique is to either get a super bright light. I've got one going on right now. I can see bits of light hitting the plastic model anyway. It just naturally wants to be highlighted, and I can kind of follow that as a reference point. Or you can get the model wet. The water will make it really shiny, and it makes for a great reference point, figuring out exactly where stuff goes. And that's very helpful if you're highlighting black armor, because you don't want to put a lot of colors there, because you want to keep it very, very black. So it matters a lot where exactly your highlights are going to go. So keep that in mind. References are very helpful. Dry brushing is very forgiving. If you put some down and you don't really like where it's going, you can smear it off with your finger, or get a dry brush if you're not wanting to touch it with your fingers, you don't want to get the oils on the model or whatever. You can get a clean brush and kind of smear it around still. Maybe get it a little bit wet and smear it around some more. It's very forgiving. Or you can even go back to the previous color that you had and work that back in there if you don't like where your highlight is going. Alright, and this layer goes a lot quicker because it's a lot brighter color, and so I don't want nearly as much as what I've put down previously. I really like the colors that I've put down before, so just let it hang out, let it be there. So here we go with our final highlight. I'm going to use sky blue. The colors I'm using aren't terribly important. Really just pick your main color, which I've mentioned before is turquoise, and then just pick colors that complement it, colors that are darker and colors that are brighter. Sometimes I have it where I don't necessarily want it to be super dark, and so I'll start with a lighter color compared to my original color and then go brighter after that. Sometimes I go darker the other way. It doesn't have to be two colors complementing your main color. But whatever your fancy, whatever you feel like, whatever you want the model to look like, you can always keep on working it, keep on smearing on more colors. The final highlight is going to be the smallest amount of paint that we're actually going to use. So it goes on a lot quicker and a lot smoother. And something to note if you're highlighting stuff up, it's not always the best idea to highlight it to white. Try and pick a color that complements what you're working on, but is brighter, is more colorful than white. White tends to wash things out or make it look a little duller. I mean, unless you're going for like a stark white Space Marine or something, that's a different story. But if I were using, say I was painting something green, and I wanted to highlight that as bright as I wanted, I wouldn't go white, I would probably go yellow. Alright, so this is the finished model. That's the finished result. For the panels at least. The rest of the model isn't quite finished yet. But yeah, focus dry brushing. It's excellent for the big smooth panels. You can use it for other stuff too, but this concludes this demo for big open panels of focus dry brushing.